Yes, I have another warbird. The Hobby King Hawker Hurricane, 750mm wingspan, 3S power system warbird. This was not on my list, but I had it at such a good price, I couldn't resist it. So, someone sent me the sale that they were having on this at Hobby King. I assume they're discontinuing it. It was listed at $59.99. I thank Roland for that. And delivered to my door, including shipping, was $82.26. So that's pretty inexpensive for this plane. I think it's a beautiful looking plane. Let me give you some of the specs on it. There are some things I like about this plane. There are some things I'm thinking, what were they thinking, you know? So anyway, I'll have links to it in the show notes if there's any of them still available. I got this at the Hobby King USA warehouse. They shipped it out quickly. I had it in my hands 4 days after I ordered it. As I stated, it has a wingspan of 750mm, 30 inches. The length of the plane is 622mm or 24.5 inches. It says the weight is 430 grams. It says the thrust to weight ratio is 1:1. I guess that depends on what lipo you use. But the motor they put in it is a 2408 1300 kV brushless motor. It has a 20 amp ESC in it. And this one comes with the Hobby King ORX Gyro. I have never used one of those gyros. And the gyro only has 2 flight modes, beginner and expert. So I hope the expert is either wind mitigation mode or full manual mode, one of the two, so that the gyro is not interfering with the controls. I never used it. The ORX flight controller, so we're just going to have to see how that works out. It has 4 9-gram, I'm sure they're nylon gear analog servos, or they would state they were digital if they were digital. And it's spinning an 8x6 3-blade prop. So I don't know, 2408 1300 kV motor spinning a 3-blade 8x6 prop. I don't know if it's overpropped or not. The videos that I've watched of it, it looks like it has pretty good power on 3S, but we'll have to take it out and test that and see. It requires a 5-channel or more radio and receiver system, and the reason for that is the gyro modes are set up on channel 5. So you need a 5-channel radio if you're going to use the a 5-channel radio if you're going to use the gyro system in it. It has a recommended battery of a 3S 800 mAh 15C LiPo. Now, I just did a review of the Top RC Hobby Skyraider, A1 Skyraider. That is an 800mm wingspan, and you know how I feel about the minimum battery requirements that they have on these, because I think that is identical. The battery requirement, I think, is identical to what that one had, and the LiPo that I prefer to fly the Skyraider with is a 3S 1000 mAh 40C LiPo, a 3S LiPo. Alright, so it's got a small battery compartment, and I don't know why they didn't put some kind of tab on here. I just put a tape tab on it so that I could pull it off. It's got magnets to hold the hatch on. But one of the things I didn't care for was they brought all the cables up through right in the center of this canopy area. They have the gyro mounted underneath. Let's see if I can pull some of these cables out. The cables are fairly long. I don't know why they brought them up right in the center of the canopy area, you know, where you're going to be loading and unloading your LiPo. But it looks like they have the gyro installed, and it looks like they have the gyro upside down, mounted underneath the plywood shelf and it's held on there with two of those little tiny, looks like 4-inch zip ties. So I'm not sure why they did that. Number one, why they mounted it upside down, and number two, why they brought all the cables up right in the center of the canopy area. But I don't know how you'd be able to see the LED lights on the gyro because your wing is attached, right? So I don't know what their thought process was on that. But I'm going to cut it loose and try and bring all those cables up from the back side of the gyro, from the back of this canopy area here, rather than right up where it's going to interfere with getting the battery in and out of it. Now I have a 3S, one of my 3S 950 milliamp hour 25C LiPo. I think it's a 25C LiPo. Yeah, 25C LiPo in there right now. I've got it pushed as far forward as I can get it. That is probably the largest battery I'm going to be able to fit in there because that is a snug fit. And this is not a big battery. So I wish they would have lowered that shelf a little bit, and maybe had an alternate area to mount the gyro, but so that you had more room to get a battery in there, because that is a snug fit. So you're only going to want, they've got Velcro on that shelf going all the way forward underneath this battery compartment area. Now I've got Velcro on my battery that goes the full length of the battery. So I'm going to have to cover up most of that Velcro that they've got on top of that shelf. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get that battery out of there without damaging the phone. So most of the leads have a single wire. They're just signal wire, aileron, throttle, and elevator, all single wire. The power cable has a red JST connector on it. My battery has an XT30, so I'm going to have to use an adapter for that. And then the flight mode cable, which I assume is for an SBUS or PPM receiver to connect to. And then, let me see, rather than putting the power cable on the power and the ground cable on the throttle, they put it on the rudder. So I'm not real, clear on why they did that either. Why the other channels have a single wire, why they didn't put that on the throttle rather than on the rudder, and then of course on the flight mode if you're going to use SBUS or PPM receiver, because you're supposed to be able to use a PWM receiver with it as well. So I would assume if you're using a PWM receiver, you will not be connecting the flight mode to your PWM receiver, but you definitely will be connecting the rudder, so that's where it will be getting its power from. At least that's what I think. It's not real clear to me yet, but I'm going to be using an SBUS PPM receiver with it to keep it light. I did weigh it with my 3S 950 milliamp hour 25C LiPo in it that weighs this one weighs 65.7 grams. And it weighed 453 grams. So if I allow a couple more grams for my SBUS receiver, because it's real tiny and real light, I don't think it weighs more than 2 grams. That's going to bring the all-up weight with this battery up to 455 grams. It seems a little heavy to me. But I thought that the Skyraider was going to be really heavy on the wings too, and that turned out not to be the case. So we'll see how that works out in the air, as far as what the loading feels like in flight, if it's heavy on the wings or if it's light on the wings. Okay, and I wanted to mention the specified CG. The specified CG is listed as measured from this flat portion of the wing here close to the fuselage. And it states the CG location as 45 to 50 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing. Okay, so I measured 45 millimeters back from that leading edge of the wing and marked it on the bottom of the wing, and then pushed this 950 milliamp hour battery as far forward as it will go. And it was pretty tail heavy at that 45 millimeter mark. It's even tail heavy at the 50 millimeter mark. In order for me to get a neutral balance on it, with the battery pushed all the way forward, I've got my CG under here at about 52 millimeters back from that leading edge of the wing. So I read comments on this plane and reviews on this plane. I had some people that were complaining that it was nose heavy, and I had some people complain that it was tail heavy. Somebody said they had to put like 30 grams of lead weight in the nose to get it balanced, but according to their CG specifications, this is tail heavy. With this battery pushed all the way forward, and this is a larger battery than what they recommend, so it's going to be a little heavier battery, and it's completely forward. The end of that battery is right there about where the leading edge of the wing is. So I don't know how you could use their specified battery and get it pushed all the way forward and get a CG at even 50 millimeters back. So I watched Stuart from Hobby King fly it, and I think it was before he performed his second or third flight with it. He stated that he had his CG at the trailing end of this canopy cover, right next to where this, right in front of where the little plastic glass, clear canopy is for the pilot. And so I looked at where that was and where I have the CG marked, and that's got to be at least 55 millimeters back from that leading edge, which is 5 millimeters further back than what's specified in the manual. It did not come with a printed manual, but I did download the digital manual from their website. So I don't know. I've had so many planes that had invalid CGs specified in the documentation. Maybe this is another one of them. I don't know. I'll take it out and I will launch it the way I have it set right now, at 52 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing, and see if it feels tail heavy or not. I'll take some weights with me to put on the nose just in case. But so I've got 5 battery packs that will fit in this. 3 of them are 800 milliamp hour 25C lipos, 2 of them are 950s. They all have the XT30 connectors on them, but the 800s are going to be a little bit lighter weight than this 950, so I don't know if the CG is correct or not. The landing gear just slots in vertically into the plastic keepers. You've got two 2mm by 8mm coarse thread screws that screw into the plastic as retainers for the landing gear. The struts seem pretty solid. I don't think the landing gear is going to be any issue. One thing that I did notice though is the front pins on the main wing are very short, and I've got a little bit of a gap here in the front. So I don't know if there's foam in front of the little piece of plywood that the 2 short pins go into is obstructing it, but I'm going to have to work on that to make sure that those short pins get seated all the way. I did read one comment from someone who had this plane, who apparently, the 2 pins on the front apparently did not seat properly, and the main wing separated from the plane in flight and completely destroyed his plane. So I want to make you aware of that. If any of you have this, haven't flown it yet, be aware that those retaining pins in the front of that wing are very, very short, and you need to make sure there's nothing obstructing them and that they fit in there completely. And then you just have a single screw in the back that secures the main wing. The tail wheel and the rudder use separate linkages just like the A1 Skyraider. I like that. It's a little more work getting everything aligned properly, but I would rather spend that a little additional time getting everything aligned properly than have that wheel attached to the rudder and putting pressure on the rudder every time that you land. So I like the fact that there are 2 different linkages for the actual rudder control surface and one for the tail wheel. There, the the horizontal stabilizer and vertical stabilizer assembly fit in a little strange. It's got two pieces of plywood that have pre-hole drills. On the vertical stabilizer, it slots into the horizontal stabilizer, and then it's got a little foam channel here on the back of the tail with another piece of plywood that slides along it and secures the back of the rudder assembly, the vertical stabilizer rudder assembly. But and then it has two retaining screws that you fasten here to secure everything. Well, one of mine snugged down just fine, the one in the back, but the one in the front, I guess they drilled the pilot hole out a little bit too much, and it would not snug down at all. And I noticed that my vertical stabilizer, where the raised section is here on the back of the fuselage, that the vertical stabilizer fits on top of, it's kind of skewed a little bit. It's not fitting flush with that raised part. And I think it's because maybe one of those plywood pieces is a little misaligned. So what I would recommend, at least what I'm going to do with mine, is I'm going to put some glue all around the seam on the horizontal stabilizer and pin that front of that vertical stabilizer in place to keep it completely straight until the glue cures. I'm not going to trust those two pieces of plywood and those two metal screws to keep this secured, especially since one of them won't even snug down. So that's what I'm going to do with that. I think that I didn't see anything about recommended movement on the control surfaces. I know what feels really good with my P-51 Mustang and with the A1 Skyraider, so I'm gonna set up my initial movement on the control surfaces very similar to what I have on those two planes. I've never been satisfied with the amount of suggested rudder movement. I've always felt it was too little, especially for doing stall turns or hammerheads. So I am going to I'm going to change the linkage on the rudder so I get more movement on the rudder than what's specified. I think they usually specify the outermost hole on the elevator and the outermost hole on the rudder. I will set it up with the elevator with the outermost hole, but the rudder I'm probably going to go with the innermost hole on the rudder. I went with the center hole on the A1 Skyraider and it still wasn't enough. So I like having plenty of rudder so you can rotate it really well with stall turns or hammerheads. So I don't know how the spinner assembly comes off here unless it just snaps in. I didn't see anything about that, but there's no retaining screw or anything for the cap. So I assume that it just snaps in. So, be careful when you're prying it off that you don't break it, but you're going to have to get you're going to have to take the spinner assembly, the cap off of it to be able to get to the retaining nut and the screws for the blades on the prop to change those out. The blades look identical, 8x6 blades look identical to what I have on the A1 Skyraider. I did order 4 replacement blades for that, so I should have some spares that will work for this as well if I end up breaking one of these blades. I did have to glue in the guns in the front of the wing. It does come with 2 drop tanks, but I'm not gonna put the drop tanks on it. I'm gonna fly it the way it is right now. All right, so the other things that come in the bag is there's a grub screw. I assume that is for the prop assembly. It comes with a spare 2mm by 8mm coarse thread screw that's identical to the 2 that you use for retaining as retainers for the landing gear. It came with a spare plastic clevis, and it came with a Velcro pad that you could put on a battery. So that's everything that I remember coming in there, plus the drop tanks, which I'm not going to use. I did watch as I stated earlier, the videos from Stuart at Hobby King, and he did also fly this with a 2S LiPo. So it's not going to have as much power. It's going to be lighter. It's not going to have as much thrust to weight ratio with the 2S LiPo as it will with a smaller 3S LiPo. But that's also an option. It seemed to fly fine when he was demonstrating it with a 2S LiPo, and I think he used a 1000 milliamp hour 2S LiPo, and he used an 850 milliamp hour 3S LiPo. So I really wish that there was enough room in this battery compartment to use one of my 3S 1000 milliamp hour 40C LiPos, but there just isn't enough room in there. So you want to be careful about, you know, what batteries you order for this plane. You might find that it's just depending on the dimensions of the battery, you just may not be able to get it in there. Like I said, this 950, I'll have a link to it in the show notes so you can look at it, look at the specs on the battery and see the dimensions and the weight of the battery. But this is not a big battery. It's about, the 950s are newer than the 800s that I have, and of course, as battery technology gets better, you can get more milliamp hours in a battery now that's no bigger than like the 800 that I had. The 800s I have are older. They're almost identical in size to these 950s. So this is, I think this is probably going to be the one I prefer to fly it with. Now, before I take it out and test it for the first, the maiden flight session, I will give you information on what the amp draw is on the power system with a fully charged LiPo at 100% throttle and 50% throttle. I don't know what that's going to be. I know on my A1 Skyraider that's spinning a 4-blade prop, but it's an 820 kV, not a 1300 kV. And it's pulling at full throttle. It's pulling 14.7 amps. And I think at 50% throttle, I think it was somewhere around 7.6 to 7.8. I'm guessing with a smaller motor and one less blade, but you know, since these are also 8x6, I'm guessing that the amp draw is probably going to be very similar to that. But we'll find out. I'll give you that information before I take it out to the field and launch it. So stay tuned for that. It will be after the Christmas holiday, before I have a chance to take this out and do the maiden. I've got some work to do, you know, some gluing to do, and get the programming done for the gyro and all that kind of stuff before I take it out. So stay tuned for that. Everybody have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday, and I will see you after the New Year.